let's make a start just with a brief acknowledgement of culture. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which all of our sites are held and where we're all joining from today. I'd like to pay respect to elders past and present, thanking Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders for their continued connection to land, waters and community, acknowledging the important role they continue to play within our communities. And I'm coming to you from Bunurong country today, but I'm sure we're joining from all sorts of lands around the nation. Let me tell you just very briefly about our organisation and our why, and that's where a lot of this work has come from. The topic that we're speaking about today in youth employment aligns really closely with our organisational why, which is to strive every day to lead and support individuals, families, communities, and our nation to become global leaders for inclusion. And excitingly, we're big enough to do that, to have really aspirational goals, which is great. And we resonate with this because we're a service that enables young people with disability to be more included in workplace settings, which we know is a really big gap in our country. So this is what we'll cover today, a little bit about who we support, about the opportunities on offer in youth employment, and how we can help youth achieve employment goals. We'll talk and paint a picture about what's possible, sharing a participant story, and then we'll go into some detail about the funding options available to help support employment. We'll give you some information if you'd like to find out more, express an interest in what's on offer, and also have an opportunity to answer some questions towards the end of the session. So feel free to jump on them at any time through the session. Even if we end up answering them, that's okay. So let's talk about why are we looking at this? So we're talking about youth employment for those living with disability because the statistics around this topic in our country are pretty confronting. Young people living with disability, so if we talk about 15 to 24-year-olds, for example, they're twice as likely to be unemployed than their peers who aren't living with disability. So we see this gap as a huge missed opportunity, not only for that young person, but for everybody. You know, the workplace, we're missing all that diversity. We also know that about 18% of young people who are accessing NDIS services have employment supports funding already in their plans. It's a pretty small number because we know there's a lot of people on the NDIS who would be eligible for this employment support. They just don't know about it. We also know that for some of those people who already have the funding, they don't even know they've got it or aren't sure how to use it. So there's another opportunity there that we can help match the people with the right supports. And we do have some real wins with our employment supports program as well, helping to meet young people's needs and fit them with the right opportunity for them. So I know I don't need to tell you guys from where you've come from as parents, carers, and coordinators of support. You guys all know that young people living with disability face a lot of barriers to employment. Some of these are systemic, some are related to low expectations, and many related to lack of opportunities. And we're really looking to change this. So on this slide here is what we're all about. We're looking to shape jobs to the person rather than the other way around. And that's what our employment support service does. So with giving people the right support at the right time, the young person can be helped to explore their interests and skills through individual vocational assessments, a really great starting point to match the opportunities or the training to that young person and their interests and also their strengths. It really helps set up for success from the word go. So when we talk about this journey and who we're supporting, we're talking about people throughout this age range, starting at early adolescence. And this is for all people, whether you're living with a disability or not. Those early adolescence years, the pre-teens, it's about emerging sense of becoming yourself. You know, late, mid-primary school age, typically, you're trying different things, you're exploring what feels right to you. And those pre-teens are often making closer friendships and strengthening how they express themselves. As teenagers moving through secondary school and later adolescence, there's a shift to more ownership or involvement in your own health and well-being. You start to navigate more, you get more and more choice in what you're studying or learning and your vocational opportunities. This is that key stage. This is the stage where young people often have an opportunity to do some work experience with school, or they start to get their first casual or part-time job as a junior. Then they're building skills, they're facing some adversity in those opportunities, they're getting stretched a little bit, and they're gaining skills, resilience, a whole lot of things to take through life. And then finally, in early adulthood, young people often want more autonomy in their living situation. They want to make more choice over their finances and other choices like what they're studying or what work they're doing. They're starting to think about what's happening with life after school? Where am I going to take my life? This really matters because the opportunities to train towards getting a job or career, the opportunities to have that work experience early, maybe it's volunteering, all of them have a huge flow on effect to quality of life. The benefits and quality of life, like social connection, feeling valued, having meaningful things to do where you're contributing, that sense of self and sense of worth, that financial security, I can make choices. I can go for a holiday, I can buy what I want to buy. And that all brings confidence and development of that sense of identity. That's why this matters to young people who are finding their way in life. We need to be getting this experience happening as early as we can for these young people. So that's where our youth teams come in. So we know that finding a job, even getting started on this journey, can feel daunting. And that's for everyone. You would have seen it, Tracy, all the time, right? It's
Absolutely.
yeah. And it feels really big. And sometimes it feels like too big. I don't even know where to start. And that's for the individual, for their family, even for their support networks, and sometimes for therapists. It can feel really big. But we're really lucky. We've got this dedicated youth team, an integrated service that matches your therapy with your employment supports. So our youth team here, if you imagine this guy in blue, he's the person who is our youth lead practitioner. So he's your key contact for all the members of the team, for the young person and their supports. This guy builds the team around the young person, and that team involves allied health professionals, OT, speech, physio, or the big three, as well as behaviour support. And we also have opportunities to bring in employment coaches, vocational assessors, and habit coaches. So a really great integrated team that can all work together to overcome barriers that people might be facing to getting ready to be employed. And also the journey doesn't just start when you get a job. That support can continue in the workplace as well to overcome challenges that might come up. So let's talk about these 4 key programs that our youth employment supports offer. The first helps you to access that employment support funding. So that's where that original therapy team starts off. So this scenario on this slide involves where NDIS funding is available to the young person. And Tracy's going to talk a little bit in a moment about when that's not available. So when there is NDIS support, our youth team's often where that journey begins, helping to look at the broad areas of life, really broad. What are all the things that you as a young person have a human right to participate in? And then we can explore in more details those areas of life that that young person wants to change in their life. And thinking longer term, especially in this age group, it's often going to involve study, learning, volunteering, employment, all these things that we would term vocational outcomes. Once that vocational outcome is identified, it's really easy then to ask the NDIS for funding through one of our outcome reports. We can advocate for that funding to be included in the NDIS plan, which then means we have access to those youth team members who are specialists in employment supports. And that's where we'd bring in someone like a vocational assessor to really dig in deeper to that person's strengths, interests, and abilities. And I'll hand over to Tracy here because she knows these offerings like the back of her hand and she could speak to the other two. Thanks, Tracy.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. Lovely to have you all here today. And I'm very passionate about this space because, as Trish said, employment changes lives in a few ways. And, we And the whole purpose of this funding is to make sure that young people have the support to be involved in employment, just like every other young person. So the youth employment program is what you may have known it as SLES, School Leaver Employment Supports, and it's had a little bit of a name change. But what it is, it's a 1 to 2 year program, and it's a bucket of money specifically designed for youth that are aged 15 to 22 to help them transition from the world of school to work. We focus on building fundamental work skills and capacity, and that includes identifying, a lot of young people leaving school don't know what they'd like to do. They don't know what work looks like. What are the expectations? So it's a fantastic program. And just because there's 2 years of funding doesn't mean that we will need to use all of that. Because people progress at different rates. But what it does, it builds all those fundamental work skills, and it's traditionally about 6 hours a week. And part of that is we use work experience as a platform for skills. So what that means is that we support on site because often businesses are busy, and management and teams don't have time to support a young person properly. So we support on site, help them develop skills, provide them with tools to be successful. So cover the insurance, which is really important. And the great thing about work experience is often young people have an idea about what they think a workplace will look like. And when they try it, it's often, oh my goodness, actually, I don't like that, or that's not for me, or yes, this is exactly what I thought it was going to be. And the other great thing about work experience is it provides an avenue to get in the back door to build skills. Often young people who haven't worked before, they're starting from scratch. So when we've got participants in work experience environments, we're able to build the skills and start withdrawing support as they become more resilient and capable. And when they're working fairly independently, we're then able to say to the employer, as we have done in many cases, John's been here for 6 months. He's working independently. The team love him. He's part of the team. What are the opportunities around paid employment? So there is so much value to that piece, but that youth employment program is really key to building all those fundamental skills. We also have access to psychosocial coaching. And what that does is often young people, particularly we see lots of young people who are on the autism spectrum, they have anxiety and they suffer from a little bit of depression because they find it difficult to engage. So they're often far more isolated than other people with a disability. That can provide the support in an ongoing capacity to help them manage that depression and anxiety in terms of work and moving forward. So there's lots of support, and we want young people to be really excited about their lives. They deserve it. And this is specifically designed to assist them to reach their goals and do what every other young person their age is doing. So it's exciting.
Absolutely, Tracy. And you said some really key things there about, you mentioned that the program, one of the barriers sometimes for employers is they haven't done it before. I've never supported someone with a disability. Oh, I'm worried about liability. I'm worried about insurance. Not an issue. If this support's in place, they pick up those kind of considerations to overcome that as a barrier for the employer. So that's a really powerful thing to be able to do, Tracy. I know you mentioned one story where that was the case. That was a barrier. I think it was for Jack starting at Kmart, or it was someone like that where there's, that sort of approach, or really big store, and you helped overcome that hesitation on behalf of the employer to give Jack a go. But it wasn't all smooth sailing, and it's not always smooth sailing. And in Jack's case, he wasn't enjoying that at the start, was he, Tracy? Do you want to tell
No,
us a
no,
bit about
no.
what happened there with Jack?
Absolutely. So we had a young man who came to us who had a dream of working in retail. So what we did was we actually started in an opportunity shop environment to build those fundamental customer service skills, merchandising, communication, all those skills. And we were successful in assisting him to apply for a casual job at Kmart. And, and things were going well. We bypassed the interview a little bit because he wouldn't interview well. He was on the autism spectrum and he was really anxious about that. So, but through having conversations with the employer, we were able to bypass that a little bit, which is fantastic. So things were tracking along beautifully. We're in the background, and as we always are, and can step in when we need to. And anyway, we had a call from Jack's mum saying that Jack, his hours had been significantly reduced, and they couldn't work out why. And he wasn't on the roster, wasn't presenting on the roster. And so, with his permission and his mother's permission, who was the nominee, we phoned and I went and met with the store manager. And what we discovered was they'd actually changed him. He was in a background role, filling stock and working on the floor. And they'd moved him to a front of house role where he was on the meet. He was meeting and greeting people as they walked in the store. Well, instantly I knew that that didn't suit him. And their concern that they'd had some change in management. So the conversation, around his support hadn't been consistent. But there was this perception that this young man wasn't very friendly, and the staff would say hi and he'd sort of put his head down, and he wasn't engaging, so they reduced his hours. So what I was able to explain to the store manager was that this young man was on the autism spectrum, and a front of house role, he was very uncomfortable, and it didn't really suit him, and he'd be far better suited to a back of house where he could unload stock and fill shelves. And it was like a light bulb moment. And with this young man's permission, we were able, it was a very young crew at this Kmart store. We were able to go in on a Saturday morning before the store opened and have a little bit of a chat to the team about his disability, what it meant, how he liked to engage, all the things. And what transpired out of that was that they created a role for him out the back. He was so thorough. They loved him. The staff are now high-fiving him, and they understood that he wasn't being rude and he wasn't choosing not to engage. It was just, how things worked for him. And with that level of understanding, that education piece for that store, he is now working 22 hours, which is enough for him. Loving life. He's heading to the Christmas party this year for the first
Love
time,
it.
which his mother can't believe. But it's about, our job is to tailor and carve and have those conversations about how we can best support our participants in the workplace. And it's as Trish mentioned, it's a village approach. We want everyone on the same page, including families, anomalies, participants, employers, so that we can best support our participants. And look, it's been a beautiful outcome. And had we not had this incident, we wouldn't have been able to step in. But being able to have those open and honest communication around how we can best support is key for everyone. And look, he's just the most delightful young man. His social skills have developed. He still has no desire to be a front of house person, but he's
Okay, not
trenched.
for everybody. It's not,
He's
not
an,
for everybody.
he's an
You've got
integral
everyone's
part of
got
that
their
team.
strengths. Everyone's got, but it sounds like he really feels like he belongs now, Tracy. Like that's such a big win. But the path's not always a smooth A to B, and that's why it's so nice to have that. And I think the next slide talks to it in a little more detail, Tracy. That intensive support, so the youth employment program, that 1 to 2 years of intensive support, you can jump in where you need to. You can help overcome those barriers as they come up, because we know it's not a set and forget situation for a lot of young
Absolutely.
people.
The great thing about the SLEDs, or well, the finding and keeping a job funding for this particular youth program, is that, we have, we don't set and forget. There's reviews every 12 weeks where we sit down with the participant and their nominees, if they so wish, where we're reviewing goals, because people develop and people change. And, the job that someone might want to have a look at in the beginning, when they've developed skills and experience, it might be very different 12 weeks on. So it's really important that we're reviewing all the time, that we're on the money, that we're listening, because this is all about the participant. This is their journey, their goals, and more importantly, their funding. So we need to make sure that the support is tailored, that there's a specific roadmap or strategy in supporting these young people to reach their goals. We offer what we call a boutique service. You won't get 15 or 20 young people in an environment with us. We're saying up to 6, whereas I think we've got 3 is the maximum we've got at the moment, because we want it to be very boutique. We want it to be very participant centric. Pardon me, we're not watching movies, we're not going bowling, we're not a social enterprise. This is about building capacity for open employment. But when I say that, it doesn't have to be 38 hours a week. It could be 5 or 10,
Will
might
look
be
different for
enough.
everyone. Like with every young person, right? We've all got different appetites for work at that stage of life. I really love that, Tracy, and I love that the NDIS is happy to invest here. So
Absolutely.
they want people in the workforce. They recognize the benefits for quality of life, but they think in dollars and cents. They're the NDIS, right? So they also get that helping people to get employed means they're paying tax, and so they're putting money back into the NDIS. So the NDIS do have an appetite to invest in these young people with this support, which is pretty cool.
Absolutely. So, all of these, fundamental skills that we build, right around communication and working with others and scenarios.
Mm.
We have a non-accredited framework of modules that we work through, everything from customer service to OH&S. And when we talk about OH&S, we're not just talking about physical dangers, we're talking about emotional dangers. And,
Yeah.
if someone's not treating you well in the workplace, how do we manage that and what do we do with that? Because that's not okay. But these are the sort of fundamental skills that we're building. But this bucket of money or a lot of funding, if you like, is so critical to building all of those skills, and
Mm.
it builds all of the resilience and key fundamental skills and capacity that we need, and to make sure that young people are successful ultimately in work for the long term.
Yeah, and I think one of the key messages when I was learning about this, Tracy, when I hear about this funding, is that the message people often think is, "Oh, I'm not ready. You know, so and so's not ready to work, so therefore I'm not going to look at introducing the funding." And then the message is that the funding is to help you get ready. Like that's if you look at the building real world skills list there, it's about those fundamental skills, as you say, that will help you to get ready to find a job. It's not necessarily about we will link you with a job, it's the getting ready.
Absolutely. And if I can give you any advice, we deal with lots of schools, and sometimes you don't actually think about this till school's wound up and you've had your break and everyone's tired at the end of the year, and then mum and dad go back to work, and then brothers and sisters go back to school, and then there's often young people that are disengaged. And as we know, things don't move close quickly with the NDIS. So
Mm,
if I can encourage you to think about anything, it's about getting that funding in plans early,
yeah.
because things take time. And what happens is when young people have been disengaged from school and they end up sort of perhaps spending more time at home in front of the TV or in their bedrooms, they become disengaged and it's much harder to gather that
Yeah,
momentum. So we like to even
absolutely.
start young people this side of Christmas if we can, just so we've got that
Yeah.
momentum going, and
Yeah.
we don't drop the ball, that they're excited about what's to come,
Mm,
because school's often been a very safe place with structure, and we want to keep some of that structure going so that they've got some order and all the things
mm.
moving forward. But and
We could
one
talk
thing we
about this all day, couldn't we,
yeah,
Tracy?
sorry.
And so no, I'm as bad as you are. We both get a bit excited and we go off on tangents, but that was really helpful. What about if I'm going to give you a lead in here?
Yeah.
What about if I don't have NDAS funding?
Yes. Okay, so there's a new government contract which is Inclusive Employment Australia, which has replaced the disability employment services that you may have been familiar with. So started November 1. Now things have changed. With disability employment services, it used to assume that a participant could work a minimum of 8 hours unsupported in open employment. Well, that's no longer the case. They've removed those benchmark hours, and you actually don't need to be in receipt of a government benefit or be on the NDIS. The only thing with this is it's probably not as intense as the NDIS funded employment supports, and you would see your employment coach or engagement counsellor for 30 minutes a fortnight. So it's probably for those people who are a little bit more ready for work, who have perhaps worked before, or have had some work experience and are ready to go. But it is certainly a viable alternative. And we often in some cases work with the Futures team, the NDIS funded employment supports for one participant, and we've also do what we call dual service, where we've got Inclusive Employment Australia working with them as well. And the defining thing is there that we're doing different things. So IEA, Inclusive Employment Australia, might be working on resumes and job search, whereas we're building the soft skills in the background. And sometimes that's a nice place to marry
Mm,
the supports, and we've been very successful in doing that with some participants. So there is an alternative if you haven't got NDIS funding. But also to remembering the NDIS is an insurance company, they require evidence. So if you're in the
yes.
process of requiring funding or, applying for NDIS, we can provide quotes for service, which is your evidence, if you like, when you go for reviews or when you're applying for the NDIS.
Yeah, that's really good to know. And it looks like that starts at 14, whereas the
It
other
does.
supports is 15. Because I know we had a question on the chat there. I think it was Veronica. Thanks for your question, asking about the 14-year-old, her 14-year-old with a really long NDIS plan who was knocked back for this employment supports funding. It may have been a real computer says no, they're 14 and they didn't reach that 15 cutoff, Veronica, but I think it would be really worth exploring this as an option to help build that evidence. And then the minute your son turns 15, you're good to go with that evidence for that support. So we'll give you some more advice about what to do next as we finish off, Veronica.
Perfect.
So
And I'd like to, oh, sorry,
no, go
Trish.
ahead, Tracy, go ahead.
Okay. We've had a young man who's actually been an everyday independence referral, which was really lovely. He's come to us, and his circumstances are quite unique because he's still at school, but we've been able to wrap service around after school for him because he wants to build his skills and he wants to be ready for when he's finished school to gain employment. So we actually see this young man for an hour and a half on a Tuesday afternoon and a Thursday afternoon. He comes straight from school. We've actually moved the location so that it's closer to school. We've got a business site where we can service him to maximise the time that he's there. And this young man was really shy, used to have his head down, his eyes down. But he's in working with. We've got a fantastic business coach, employment coach that's been working with him, and he greets us warmly. He's talking about his goals. He's got two sets of goals. He wants to his first set of goals is to have a part-time job in hospitality while he's at school, with a secondary goal of perhaps becoming a chef or far more involved in hospitality. So a secondary employment goal when he should finish school. But they're working on, communication skills and interview skills and all the things that will help him reach his initial employment goal and then that secondary employment goal for when he's finished school. But a
It's
really,
so
really lovely young
lovely
man.
seeing young people grow, and it's very cool. You can see why Tracy and I do get excited about this topic. We do want to talk to you about this young man, Seth. Sorry, can we go back? We'll talk in the previous slide. Thanks, Amanda. So let's just give you this example of this young man who's also at school, like the young person that Tracy was talking about. Seth is 16. He's been with our organisation for a few years now. During that time, he's had some really big life changes, big family moves from a rural environment to the city. His family have welcomed a baby, so he's had to adjust to those life changes and all the noise and chaos that a little one can bring to a household. And a few years back, Seth and his family were really quite disengaged. So Seth would go to school and then go home and get on that screen and just game for hours and hours. He wasn't motivated. He wasn't thinking about the future. He wasn't motivated to do anything other than really that. And it was a real struggle for all involved. And Seth came involved with our youth team. Initially, he came on board just for speech pathology support around his social communication and emotional regulation skills. So we often see these words in our referrals, and we're very much about so that you can do what. So what's that going to mean in life, right? So pushing it to the next step. So working with our team, Seth was able to identify some really meaningful life goals. He wanted to make friendships, make more local connections, do something that he really enjoyed outside of school, to build, his own sense of self. He wanted to be more involved at home. He wanted to take a bit more responsibility as a 16-year-old, the only man in the house at that point. He wanted to start taking on that role, do a few more chores, build that independence. And he also identified that he wanted to get a job, but he didn't really know much more than that at that stage. So on the next slide there, we'll fast forward a little bit and see what our therapy team did. So a speech pathologist got involved initially, did some skill building with Seth initially to help him to be able to connect with peers in the way that he wanted to. And then identified helping him with some strategies to remain calm when things didn't all go to plan. And then when those independent goals were identified and the vocational goals, they brought in an OT. And at that time, the OT worked to make the environment as positive as possible for Seth so that he was able to achieve his potential. So, looking at the sensory environment, looking at the challenge and matching that talent to the demand, and worked with a habit coach so that the practice of those therapy strategies were really doable in Seth's routine. Um, and they found with that support that Seth started to gain some momentum. Tracy was talking about momentum before. So he wasn't so disengaged. It wasn't all about the screen. He's starting to do more day to day, show more interest in being out in his community, doing 16-year-old stuff, hanging out, going to activities, going to the shops. With the habit coach, he started doing his own laundry, cleaning his room, being a bit more proactive about his own personal hygiene. And he started to explore cooking. And it sounds like that was a real game changer for him. He identified that he actually really enjoyed cooking and he wants to explore that more in his first job. A bit like the other person you were talking about, Tracy. He's got a short-term goal of having a casual job that's something to do with food, but longer term, he wants to work in tech. So that gave a lot for our employment support specialists who came in to start working with in terms of building those independence skills. So the great news is that Seth has started that work. He started proactively building the skills and getting himself job ready, applying for a tax file number. Didn't have enough points of ID. So he's gone to get his learner's permit. So all that work's ongoing at the moment. He's built his resume. He's more confident about what his next steps are. And it hasn't just been a change for Seth, has it, Tracy? His mum has also got on board more. She's more
Oh,
engaged, right? And she knows how to support him now.
and I think too that's the whole thing. It's certainly about the participant, but the ripple effect is that it changes the whole family's lives because when our children are happy and engaged, we're happy, and I think that's the key here. It just has that ripple effect because we want to see our children be happy and be the best that they can be and reach their own individual goals, whatever they may be. But that certainly takes pressure off and fulfills fills our cup, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's keep going, Amanda, just aware of time. We've got so much to tell you about. So there can sometimes be a temptation to delay starting to address employment goals. We've got some really proactive people on the call today looking at this with 14-year-olds, so that's fantastic. You're obviously not delaying, which is great, but it can be a temptation to delay. I'll do it later, after we finish school, when they're a bit older. One day this magical readiness will just happen. Sometimes people can really feel like there are barriers there that can't be overcome. And often that's because they don't know that there are the supports available or they don't know how those supports will help their individual circumstance. But it really doesn't have to be as hard as sometimes it feels. The support's ready. It's ready to help you get ready to get a job. And we know that those who get started early when they enter the workforce have better long-term employment outcomes as long as they do that with the right support at the right time. So to break down a typical scenario for you, here's Sean. Sean's 16, doesn't feel like they're ready to start work, so doesn't start work or employment support. Meanwhile, other people Sean's age, they're doing work experience, they're getting their first casual job as a junior, and employers are loving hiring them because they are cheap as chips to pay a 15-year-old. Don't have to pay them much. So they're getting all this experience. When these young people are starting jobs, they're learning customer service, they're working how to work alongside other people, being responsible for tasks, turning up on time. How am I going to get there? All of these skills they're learning, which is helping them build networks, build skills, build that confidence. And if we fast forward to 18, when employers have to pay a greater wage to that 18-year-old, they have to decide who to hire. And they're looking at someone who's been working for a couple of years and has some foundational skills, or they're looking at Shan, who didn't take that opportunity when she was 16, so she hasn't built those foundational skills. So the workforce is a competitive place. So the earlier you can get started, the better, in terms of that, not having that gap widen so much as it does, within a few years' time. So, but if Sean is linked in at 16, 15, 16 with the right supports, they have that same opportunity to build skills, but with that additional support. If you are supporting someone who's older, it's never too late to get started. It just might, the supports might look slightly different for someone depending on the funding that's available for that age bracket, of course.
And Trish, just on that too, things
Mm,
can change at school. You can have a young person who's tracking along beautifully at school, and then things change, and they're not happy, and they're
mm,
not coping with the curriculum, and so that it just gives people options if they've already got their plan set up with the funding to support alternative goals. It makes life so much easier rather than to having to hold on and wait for that funding to become, active or in
mm.
place. So yeah, it's just wise to have that set up because it just gives you options if circumstances change.
Absolutely. Which it does lead us to the funding, Tracy. So it's not too hard to get.
No, it's not. It's you just need to demonstrate that you've got an employment goal or a capacity building goal in your plan. So when you're talking with your planner or or you're having a plan review, it's really important for you to be saying that that you've got an employment goal and you'd like some funding to reflect that. It's the capacity building, finding keeping a job is replace the SLES. So don't be caught up on if you've got an existing plan and you think you've got employment supports funding in there, don't be too hung up on about it. Let us have a look because often there's other things that we can use and it presents differently. As I said, it used to be school level employment supports. Now it's finding and keeping a job or employment assistance. So
Mm,
things change and those plans are trickier and a little bit hard to read. So and certainly, those other related supports, like OT and things, we can have a look at how we couple that with the employment supports to, build resilience and capacity as well.
mm.
But we're one phone call away. Happy to have conversations and everyone's circumstances are completely different and sometimes you just want to have a personal conversation to talk through your circumstances. So please feel free to do that. We're always happy to do that.
That's a really great point, Tracy. And that's how I sometimes feel when I'm looking at all the different pockets and buckets of money that you can use towards supporting that employment journey. The message to you guys is it doesn't matter. If you have a conversation with our team, we'll help guide you because they'll be able to find the little pockets and buckets that might be in your plan that you don't even know you can use for this purpose. So, and if it's not there, we'll help to support you to know how do you get that funding in your plan. So do you want to speak to this one, Tracy?
Sure.
Alluded to it.
So look, if you've got any questions or you want to discuss anything further, please feel free to reach out to us and we can book a 15-minute or longer. Please don't think it will cut you off at the 15-minute mark. And we can talk through your personal situation. We would love to come out to schools. We find that information sessions for families, we can do it in, as an afternoon tea, post school, whenever you'd like, is a great opportunity to come and have a chat with families. And in fact, we've been, the school in Werribee, I've been there over 3 days and I've had back-to-back appointments in a meeting room with families so I can have individual private conversations. So there's always the opportunity to do it like that. But there's also, we've got an online form that you can fill out where we can get your information and make a call back to you to discuss your circumstances and where things are at. So there's 1,000 ways you can express interest. But if you have any queries, and even if you're not ready, we can talk you through how to get ready. So we're here as a support and always happy to have those conversations.
That's great. Thank you, Tracy. Really helpful. Well, we've got a couple of minutes. We'll just jump on. I think some of the questions we've answered through the presentation. There's one here from Julie. Does this also help with identifying options for further education at uni? Things like what to study, looking at strengths, that sort of thing.
Well, we talked about that vocational assessment piece. That's a great tool for mapping out goals and interests and a bit of a very strategic pathway that can wrap around service and future studying or development. So that, vocational assessment that we can assist with in the beginning will help sort of drive that and set up a strategic pathway. So absolutely.
Yeah, that's certainly what I'm seeing as well. Is it's not all about job or no job. It's work, it's training or skill building, it's study, it's volunteering. For some people, it's that pathway. So it does look different to everyone, and we really encourage you, if you're thinking this might be helpful for the young person you're supporting, or for yourself if you're a young person jumping in, please reach out. We'll have, as Tracy said, a chat with you about your circumstance and what we'd recommend in your situation. And if you're a family or a coordinator of support and you're working with someone that springs to mind as we've been talking through these scenarios, we can absolutely go out and speak to their school if that would be helpful, or have a conversation with them. So have a chat with them and see what they'd like to do next. Now, we've got one more poll, we've gone 1 minute over, so apologies everybody for that. If you are still able to help. Oh, it looks like you've already been answering. Aren't you guys fabulous? So we asked a question about how confident you're feeling. So I'm I'm glad everyone's feeling pretty good, feeling hopeful. Some of you still a little unsure, but willing to find out more. And some are keen to jump in and get started. So if there's anything we can do to help you with that, either answer a question now, or please get in contact and have a conversation if there's something we can do to help you find out more, to feel more confident in taking the next steps. Just checking if there's any other last minute questions. Oh, fantastic. Thank you. An anonymous question. What period do NDIS usually fund this support for? I have a participant on his 4th year. So I'm guessing by 4th year, do you mean 4th NDIS plan? Not sure. Sorry, you might need to clarify. It doesn't matter if you're talking about what NDIS year. It's not like the NDIS will say, well, we've given you 5 NDIS plans and therefore you're out of time. Not at all. It's about how old you are. So that for the intensive supports, that real 15 to 22 is the key stage for those intensive employment supports. And you just need to have identified a vocational goal. So if you're NDIS, 15 to 22, and have any vocational goal, that could be training, it could be volunteering, it could be work, then you are eligible for this funding. Doesn't matter if you've had 10 NDIS plans.
And that 2 years, when that 2 years of funding is up, that doesn't mean they cut you off there either. It'll just turn into capacity building and other forms of funding that will continue to support development and capacity in the employment space. So don't be concerned about that, because sometimes they used to offer a 3rd year of the School Leaver Employment Supports, and we're not seeing a lot of that. But certainly, capacity building, finding a key, being a job that they couple with that when you've been through that initial program. So don't be concerned about that.
And it looks like you've had lots of rollovers. They've just clarified on the chat. So we're
Absolutely.
seeing a lot of multiple rollovers. Generally, the NDIS will need more information to then add this funding to the plan. It doesn't need to be a whole lot of extra information. As we say, it just is about demonstrating eligibility, and our therapy teams can absolutely help you with that. And so I would say go for it in that circumstance. It doesn't matter if they've rolled you over 10 times. If you give them that information about eligibility, it will mean that it will start a new plan rather than a rollover plan, but sometimes they'll just add something in, keep the plan the same and add something in. It depends on what they want to do. Gillian, thank you so much for your question. What about a participant in their 30s? How can I support them to reach their employment goals?
Absolutely. As we said, we support people up to the age of 65, 67. And there's actually a gentleman at Everyday Independence in Barwon in Geelong, and he has Parkinson's disease. He's been a truck driver all his life. He hasn't worked for a couple of years because he's been diagnosed with this illness. And it's been quite debilitating and psychologically debilitating for him. So what we're doing is working on another pathway, just an alternative pathway. We're changing things up and building new skills. And I know that we can help this man. And he lost his friends because work was his whole life, and Certainly the income has had an impact on his family. And look, it mightn't be full time moving forward, but it's just about changing direction. And I know that we can help him. So, absolutely, anyone post that key youth piece. Absolutely, it can look like anything, and certainly we're seeing people who are a little bit more mature with funding. There's a gentleman in Werribee he was actually a computer programmer for IBM, and he had a stroke. Hadn't worked for 10 years and lost all of his confidence. And we're working
Mm.
with him. He's working in a retail role with computers he gets tired and to see what he can manage. And so he's working 10 hours, and we're just working with that at the moment. And it's just a little bit of a different direction,
Mm.
but it has given his life back. So it really in this space can look like anything. Certainly today's presentation was about youth, but we can support anyone of working age who has the appropriate
That's
funding.
so great to know. It is never too late to get some support. So absolutely reach out and have a conversation if you're wondering about somebody that you're supporting. We just had the last question here. Somebody who's just caught up, they got just able to join very late in the session and wondered if the session was recorded or slides available via email. That might be one for Amanda. We've recorded today, have we, Amanda? Is that available?
Yes, but we can share that via email after the session.
Fabulous. That's really great. Thanks, Amanda. So, will that automatically go out to all attendees, Amanda?
No, we'll put it together. It'll probably go out tomorrow, Trish, because we'll add
Okay.
some attachments as well.
Perfect. All right. Thanks so much. Well, thank you so much for everybody for joining us in what probably was your lunch break. Really appreciate it. And I hope that we've inspired you to be a bit curious and know what's available out there and feel a bit hopeful and jump in, have a conversation. We'd love to be able to support you in your unique situation too. So thanks, everybody. See
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.